This video is sponsored by Game Toppers. Turn your own kitchen or dining room table into a premium portable game solution at a fraction of the cost. Hey everybody, welcome to the next installment in the series I'm calling What Happened To. Today we're talking about what happened to 2014. Again, this is where I go back through the most anticipated list on Board Game Geek of that year, as compiled by Rick Vineyard and voting on by the Board Game Geek members. And then we'll just jump in. I'll have playlists and all this stuff and links to the geek list and mentioned here, all in the description below. So if you're catching up midstream, you can kind of get caught up. We'll jump in right into it. I will skip some numbers because some of them are repeated from previous years. You know, the games didn't come out and stuff as expected. So the number 20 here is Descent: Journeys in the Dark, Shadow of the Nerekhall. So I think this is the second Descent expansion to show up on this list. You know, it come out. I think this one really started to gain popularity. I think when it came out, it was sort of not a shock, but it was kind of a mid-year announcement, so people weren't necessarily anticipating the initial release. This one, like I said, you know, last week or 2 weeks ago, it's lasted a long time, right up until the announcement of the new kind of third edition Legends of the Dark. It was coming out with expansion after expansion. It's got the app that came out after a while. It really lasted quite a long time. I think it was probably almost 10 years. So yeah, I mean, with good reason people were anticipating this one. So that was the number 20. Number 19, this one's a little bit of a surprise, is Argent, the Consortium. Now this is kind of like, it's from Level 99 Games, designer Trey Chambers, who also did another game that's escaping me the name of it. I also enjoyed that one. I enjoyed this one. This is a very kind of different worker placement game with like different colored workers, and very, very unique take on worker placement. And the theme of it was kind of like an anime style Harry Potter. So it was like a wizarding school, but kind of like as an anime. Really, really interesting, neat stuff. Lots of combos and abilities and all kinds of cool stuff. I don't really remember hearing about this game until it came out. And I just thought it looked really funky and different, and it really is. I don't know how well this has stayed in print, to be honest with you. Millennium Blades, I think was the other one. I'm not sure if he did that one. Sorry. Yeah, this one's been around. I don't know that it's still readily in print. But if you can find this one, I would recommend it. It's a very, very kind of unique take on, like I said, worker placement, and it's got a kind of a funky theme for this style of game. And it's really enjoyable, lots of good strategy. It's just a really fun game. I definitely recommend it. So I was kind of shocked to see it on here, but somebody was excited about it. I didn't know about it until it actually hit. So that was number 19. So we're going to skip 18 and 17 because those are repeats. We're going to go to 16. This is Fleet Arctic Bounty. I believe this is the first expansion for Fleet. First big expansion. This really made the game amazing, I think. The base game was good. It was solid enough. If you've not played Fleet, I do recommend it. It's kind of a combo auction game / San Juan or Race for the Galaxy kind of thing. Basically, you're deploying boats for fishing or crabbing and all kinds of different stuff, and trying to like power up your boats. The boats have combo abilities. You get different licenses, which gives you different abilities, and the cards in your hand are worth coins, and so you pay for your auctions for the licenses with the cards in your hand, and you buy boats, which are the cards with the other cards. So it's like this huge multi-use card thing. Now the first expansion here, the Arctic Bounty, this really added, I think, just that extra layer of complexity that the game needed. The base game is pretty like even keel. I mean, when I first played it, I was like, this is great. But after a while, after a few plays, you're like, okay, it's kind of the same. It gets a little bit samey. And I would say that I don't think if you were to like try to buy Fleet that you would necessarily need the expansion right away. I think you will get some plays out of it. But after a while, you're going to want to add this expansion to it, because it just adds a lot of cool combos, extra licenses and stuff, and it just makes setting up the game to play out how you want it kind of interesting, and the dynamics of it are there. So it's kind of like playing Dominion with the base box. You're like, yeah, okay, after a while you get it. But then you add an expansion or two, and then it really comes to life. And that's what Fleet Arctic Bounty did. And I don't really hear Fleet talked about too much anymore. I don't know. I mean, they've had some spin-offs. Like you had Fleet the Dice game, which was like a roll and write come out, and there was like a gosh, what was there was like a light version of Fleet. It was sort of like it was a card game, but it wasn't like this game. It was just kind of it wasn't even like Fleet. It was just kind of its own thing, like a little set collection game. But the roll and write was neat. Roll and writes aren't really my bag, but I think you should be able to pick this up. I know Eagle Griffin's usually pretty good about keeping the stuff in print, so you should be able to find it, and I definitely recommend the base game, and if you like that even a little bit, get the expansion, because that's really going to add a lot to it. So it's nice to see that on this list here. Let's see, the number 15 is Galaxy Defenders. This is from Ares Games. This is kind of like a sci-fi version of the Dungeons and Dragons adventure games. It gets compared to those a lot because you've got kind of a sort of deck-driven, AI-driven sort of overlord that players are playing cooperatively. It's kind of a dungeon crawl, not really a dungeon in this case, but you're moving through different alien terrains and sci-fi terrains and fighting through these different quests. And that's what it is. I mean, it's just like a sci-fi D&D adventure game, like the Castle Ravenloft, Legend of Drizzt, Wrath of Ashardalon, those games. It's a sci-fi version of that. It's really fun. I think it's arguably a better design than those. Is a little bit tighter, you know, and it's just got a little bit more going on, a little bit more crunch. And it's sci-fi, so you can kind of play around with loadouts and stuff like that of your heroes, and the different abilities and stuff are just really slick. This one has been around. I think they did, I'm trying to remember, they did some other like edition or something recently, like a re-release of it. Not too long, it was like maybe a year ago, 2 years ago. So this one is still kind of percolating around. And they've done their own kind of fantasy version of this, which I've not played, which I heard was kind of a mess, but what do I know? It's the Sword and Sorcery or something. I think it was like really over the top, lots of stuff and the huge campaign and all these things. But if you can find Galaxy Defenders, even the original edition of it, I would look it up, you know, and take a look at it, because this is a lot of fun. Nice little co-op. Number 14 is King's Forge. And this, I have a vague memory of this game. I remember not particularly liking this game. It's kind of a dice card game. It's like almost like a deck building game where you kind of getting these different combos together, and you get almost like a Machikoro or something, but like a little bit more involved. I could see why this would have been anticipated, because it looks really nice. It's got some nice, you know, kind of standard fantasy art, but it's well done, well illustrated. And it had a kind of a dice card game thing. It looked really neat. I think I played this a couple of times. I want to say I played it at least 3 times. And I remember just it not really working out for me in the group. It just was a little bit dry at the end of the day. It was just very dicey and numbery and all that kind of stuff. It didn't really, I don't know. It was like, I felt to me like it was trying to be cute or something, and it just didn't really stick. I think there's people that like this game. I wouldn't recommend it personally. To me, there's way better dice things out there. But I think it did have some good reception. So that's number 14, King's Forge. Don't really hear it talked about too much, though. I don't think it's really lasted. Number 13, this is a weird one. This is Coin Age. This was published by Tasty Minstrel Games, which is out of business, which I mentioned a few weeks ago, which is unfortunate. And this really is just like a area control game with you just need some pocket change. And I think you could get a special edition that came with little cardboard tokens, but you could play it with like quarters, nickels, dimes, and so on. And then you had these little areas, and it was on like the size of a credit card, and you could get one card. And I would think it was double-sided, say like 2 maps, and you would put the coins out, and you could stack coins on top of each other, and you could sort of, you know, try to take over. It's just this kind of weird sort of spatial order of operations thing going on. It was a kind of a fun little game. You know, Tasty Minstrel's out of business, so I don't know that anybody would pick this up. I think this was sort of like an experiment to see how micro can we make a micro game. And really, literally the game is like a card, and then there were rules. It was just one card, and then if you had some pocket change, you could play it. Or if you had like one little small sheet of cardboard tokens, you just played on the card. So it felt like a little bit of like a cash in on the hype of micro games back then, because micro games were really like going nuts. But it's actually a fun little game. I enjoyed playing it. I don't want to oversell it. Like, just for what it is, it was fun. You know, a few plays, maybe half a dozen plays, and then you can move on with it. So that was number 13, Coin Age. Different kind of thing. Number 12, Brew Crafters. Now, this was from Dice Hate Me Games, who was purchased or merged with Greater Than Games, but now I think they've gone their separate ways. And so I think you might see this come back. I think it's been out of print for a while. Now, Brew Crafters, as the name says, is about kind of building your own beer brewery. And it had a lot of resemblances loosely to Agricola. So it was a kind of a Agricola vibe worker placement game. You could get different brews and different combos with the different brews, and you build up your little, like, you know, your store, your factory, and that kind of stuff. So you had your own kind of like a little player board there, kind of like Agricola in that way. But it's a really good game. This is a really fun game, kind of a cool theme, you know. You don't really see this thing kind of microbrewery type of thing. I mean, you don't usually see that kind of thing. I would recommend it. If you can, I bet you could find this in the bargain bins and stuff floating around there. The game is way better than it, you know, deserving to be in a bargain bin, in my opinion. It's a really good, solid worker placement, a lot of fun, good Euro elements, good like principles of design and all that fun stuff. It just feels like a really solid game in that way. And it's a fun little kind of different theme. It's not set, you know, in the Middle Ages or some European farmstead. You know, it's microbrew, so it's cool. I would recommend this one. I think maybe you see this come back in a new edition now that Dice Hate Me has kind of gone back on their own. We'll see what they do with the company there. But anyway, that's number 12, Brew Crafters. We're going to skip one. And then number 10 is Dead of Winter. I don't think this has shown up on the list yet. I feel like it has, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. Yeah, I mean, this has been a big hit. This is still out, still published. There's been one huge expansion, one kind of little expansion, I think. Well, little. They kind of like combined the games or something. A really good game. And this kind of was like filling that Battlestar Galactica niche. You know, that was kind of like the only game in town when it came to like these big, epic, you know, trader games. You had Shadows over Camelot, and then Battlestar Galactica, and then really Dead of Winter. I mean, you had other games like this, you know, like a Werewolf and One Night, and that kind of stuff doesn't really count. You're talking like a real big, full board game, and, you know, with a possible trader element. This, of course, was set kind of in a zombie apocalypse. It had the whole crossroads system, which was really neat, where you had these kind of story events that would kind of come up. The twist on the trader was really cool and how that worked. There's actually a fix that's needed that was in the expansion in terms of like how the turn order worked, because the turn order would pass counterclockwise. I can't remember the exact problem, but the trader could basically wait to strike and just, you know, win the game if they were halfway smart about how they did it. So there's a way to fix that, and it's in the expansion. I think the rules are on Board Game Geek, so if you don't need the expansion to play with that rule tweak, but after the game had been out a little while, I think people had figured out, you know, that kind of loophole. So, but it's an easy fix. It's on the forums, but it's really a lot of fun. I recommend the expansion. I think the game is better with it. It adds some cool modules, some kind of, you know, far out there sci-fi types of modules that are neat, you know, and just some other elements and stuff that made it really cool. And it made it really possible to play it as a co-op. Was more fun because you could just play the base game as a co-op. You could just take the trader out if you wanted to and just play straight co-op. That was more fun with the expansion. I wouldn't really recommend personally the base game just co-op. It's not that much. It's kind of boring. You got to throw the trader in there. But if you have the expansion, you know, just do straight co-op if you want. So anyway, that's number 10, Dead of Winter, still going strong. Number 9, I'll mention this again because they're new expansions. So, you know, more expansions for X-Wing. I mentioned that last week. So we'll probably see this here for a couple of years, I would imagine, because I feel like this game gained in popularity as it went along. A lot of games, you know, they have a splash and then they go away. I think X-Wing kind of picked up popularity and was doing that for a couple of years. So I've talked enough about X-Wing already. But yeah, so that's number 9, still going strong. Number 8 is King of New York, which is kind of like a new edition of King of Tokyo, which came out a couple of years prior. I think kind of came out of blue. Nobody really knew it was coming or really knew what to expect. this is another one that kind of gained, I think, popularity over the years. And then they came out with King of New York, which to me is not as good of a game. I like King of Tokyo much better than King of New York. It had a little bit extra wrinkle, kind of a needless like fiddly element with kind of two city spaces that you could go into and stuff like that. It just kind of added too much. The straight King of Tokyo was all you need. I think King of New York's kind of been forgotten about. King of Tokyo is still going strong. There's like all these different editions of it. They've come out with expansions and different monsters and packs and stuff that you can get. So people were probably rightly excited at the time for a new kind of version of King of Tokyo because it was really way more fun than it had any right to be. And then, yeah, I don't know, King of New York kind of went away. But King of Tokyo is still around. So number 7 is Sentinels of the Multiverse Vengeance. So this is actually a surprise here because Sentinels of the Multiverse at this time, about a couple of years, and I think this is the first time we've seen it on the list. So I think this one also did really gain in popularity because, Greater Than Games came out with it. It was their first game ever. I think the first game they ever really designed, those folks. And it was kind of like call it like an indie hit, a cult hit kind of thing. I was a big fan of it because there was not really any superhero games at all back then. And it was just cool. It was a lot of things. I mean, you could kind of look back in hindsight and say it was kind of fiddly because you needed a lot of like D20s to track different effects and abilities and all those things, a whole mess of dice out there. And it could get unwieldy with 4 players, But a couple of players, it was fine. But yeah, now to see this expansion, I think it did start to grow in popularity because their Kickstarters just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. They came out with like the Ultimate Edition or whatever, a collector's edition, and then they kind of like they ended it, and then they started up like a new one. There's like a new edition. It was like a streamlined edition. This was like a year or 2 ago. So this one's really been kicking around, and this is really, this is the Greater Than Games game. They have other games obviously, and other successful games, but this is really kind of their masthead game. So I think this one really did start to pick up popularity. So that's number 7, going strong. Number 6 is Pandemic the Cure, and this is a dice game, and you are trying to basically play Pandemic but with dice, and you're allocating them to different areas and locales to fight the disease and stuff. This one was pretty good. It's okay. Like it's not bad. I remember at the time there was like a tournament about it, and that was kind of a big deal for that year because people were really interested in kind of the competitive side of that and how you could you kind of were playing Yahtzee and then trying to get symbols and stuff to fight different combos and stuff on the board and fight back the disease, just like in Pandemic. I don't remember being really that enthralled with the game. I remember liking it and enjoying it, but it was just like, this could be anything, I don't know. But I have seen this one around still. It's got the Pandemic name on it, so I don't think they print a lot of these, but I think they do print them. And it stayed around. So, but obviously this is riding the coattails, so to speak, of Pandemic, which came out 5 years before this, and was still doing really well, had some expansions and all that kind of stuff. So, but we're going to see Pandemic Legacy probably going to show up here a couple of years after this. And I expect that would be on an anticipated list depending on when it was announced and came out. And it might have been within the confines of a year. But we'll see. That's number 6. Number 5 is Shadows of Brimstone. This one, this is in my top 10 games of all time. This is still a really vibrant community and game. I know their last Kickstarter is like taking forever to deliver. I didn't get into that one. I don't really care about conquistadors and Vikings. But, this is an Old West meets Cthulhu, meets fantasy, meets aliens and dinosaurs, and just an anthropomorphic kind of mashup of, not anthropomorphic. I'm having a brain fart. What's the word? Anno something. Where you have different elements from different genres involved. I can't think of the word. So you got samurai, you got all kinds of Asian influences, and then Old West influences, and all these things. So now they decided to spin up to Vikings and conquistadors and stuff like that. The game's really good. The game is 100% Warhammer Quest, the old one from the 80s or 90s, I should say, 2.0. it takes all of the good things out of Warhammer Quest and just throws it in this crazy universe. You can play these big epic campaigns and just go on these wild and crazy adventures with no really like rhyme or reason or strong narrative thread, but that will kind of emerge over the course of the plays. I've talked a ton about it on the channel. It's one of my favorite games. I have like almost everything for it except for the brand new stuff. And it's just a ton of fun. It's just really, really fun. Like a pure Ameritrash fun. Lots of dice rolling, lots of just crazy stuff that happens. You've got an Old West guy, partnered with a samurai fighting a dinosaur, and then an undead, cowboy shows up, and then all this stuff, and the Cthulhu demon shows up at the end. It's just fun. It's just silly fun, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough. That's number 5. Let's see, number 4 is SeaFall. Okay, well, if SeaFall's on here, then Pandemic Legacy would have already existed, because SeaFall was like the follow-up Legacy game to Pandemic Legacy. So that must have already come out. I forget which year Pandemic Legacy came out, but obviously it was before this. SeaFall did not go over well. I'd never played it. I heard nothing good about it. I'm sure there's people that like it, but I think it was too much at once for a Legacy game, and it was just like, you can find this in the bargain bins. I've seen it there. It's this big exploration, seafaring game where you explore islands and new lands, and it's a Legacy game, so you're updating the board and putting stickers on there. And I think it's a little bit complex or cumbersome, probably is a better word. But it has not done well, and you can totally see it in the bargain bins. So, but yeah, I was anticipating it as well. I mean, I was disappointed to hear 100% of people I talked to did not enjoy it. So that's SeaFall. Can't win them all. Number 3 is Myth. I feel like these years are kind of funky with some of these lists. Myth was another one that looked really cool. It was kind of a big co-op dungeon crawl with cool miniatures. Had a lot of issues, I think, with its first edition rulebook. I think this company has disappeared, though. I thought the game was actually really fun. There was, like I said, some issues with the rulebook and the printing and stuff like that to clarify a lot of really important things, like big issues. But the game was fun. The game was really neat. There was some smart, kind of new, fresh mechanics for a dungeon crawl. I would say if you find this one for cheap, I would get it. If you felt like it, I would get it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, because there's a lot of dungeon crawls out there. I would recommend Shadows of Brimstone 1,000,000% over this, but it's a different thing. This is kind of a nice, smart, Eurofied, crunchy dungeon crawl. Lots of cool stuff. There's a lot of neat elements here, a lot of mechanics that are really cool. And then you can go find, like the updated rule book online, and then you should be good to go, because it's a fun game. It's a good little game. It's not little. It's a big old box, cool miniatures and neat mechanics and everything. It's just, yeah, I mean, just a little bit of a stumbling block on some of the, final production issues, but it's a cool little game. And I think this company is out of business now, or they don't make this anymore. They maybe come out with a second edition, but yeah, it's a little too bad about that one. Okay, so number 2 is Cthulhu Wars. This is still around. This is by the Peterson Games. This is kind of like your Blood Rage or your area control. God, what's the old world one? Gods of the Old World. What the heck is the name of that? The Eric Lang design. This plays a lot like that game, where you have your different Cthulhu type of gods or Lovecraft gods trying to do area control, take over the world, and it's really fun. It's really good. It's like a $500 game though, and the miniatures are just enormous and just massive. But it is a nice, solid game. I know they still make expansions for this. They've done different print runs. I know they've run into some kind of financial issues with some of their Kickstarters, so it might be tricky to find this one right now, because they're kind of in between money situations from what I can gather. I don't really know exactly, but if you can find this one cheap, because it is a little bit expensive, take a look at it or have a buddy get it and play it. It's a good, solid, fun, asymmetrical worker placement or area control game. This has a lot of cool, fun elements to it. It's just a neat thing. Like, these demons are invading Earth and you're trying to control it and destroy it, but take control of it first. And the mechanics are just really cool and really simple and fun. and just a lot of neat stuff. There's a lot of good stuff in that design. It's just kind of a shame that it didn't come out with like a cheap version of it. But the miniature stuff are really neat. They're just ridiculous. That's number 2. Number 1 is Zaya Legends of Adrift System. And this is one that's kind of like the Firefly board game, but a little different. It's kind of like I don't know what to compare it to. Not Merchant of Venus, but you fly around, you deliver cargo, you go on missions, you do this stuff. My group and I did not like it whatsoever. It has a lot of random stuff in it, and to me it was just over the line on the randomness. I think this one's still readily available. Go take a look. I'm sure you can find it. I know a lot of people do like this one, but we just did not. It was just too much randomness for this kind of competitive game here. Just a lot of other games that I would just rather play. I mean, like Firefly or the new Outer Rim game. But yeah, when this game was coming out, I was like, we were really looking forward to playing this one, and it seemed really cool and just kind of promised a lot of just fun, spacey exploration, kind of slapstick feeling kind of stuff. But again, I just think it's just too crazy. It's like, I feel like I wasted my time, So anyway, that's number 1. Now I did mention I will have this is kind of the halfway point, right? Because we've done 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and we got 5 more. So I'm going to do kind of a recap blog video probably next week before I do the other one, to kind of kick off that one or something, because I mentioned that last week I would do that. So yeah, because the one thing that struck me, I'll talk more about this in that blog, but it's just the kind of the diversity of games and game types and everything over these last years. Because you've got Cthulhu Wars, Pandemic the Cure, and then Brew Crafters, right, in this list. I mean, that's completely different games all over the place. So anyway, that's the list for this week. Thanks.